Good morning. Hope this finds you well. As you know, I'm not. So I'm recording this so that you have something to go by. And it'll be just as good as me in person, I promise. And this will give you an opportunity to actually pause and rewind if you need to, and view it again so that you can practice. So this is actually fine. It's easier to pause this than it is to pause me in class, because you know sometimes I go kind of fast. Okay, first of all, let me apologize for being absent again. This is unacceptable, but I'm going to try my best to get us caught up and provide help for you guys. The files that you need are in, I believe, if I look over here, just to be sure so that I don't tell you a lie, I believe we're in week 5, day 1. Yes, we are. And that's where your files are, week 5, day 1. And you can download those here. And you can hit pause while that's happening. What we're doing today is we're doing a login system. And a login system has many steps. You think, okay, username, password, click, we're done. Okay? But when you're programming, when you're creating macros, when you're creating routines, you have to think about every little detail. And it's very easy to forget little bits and pieces here and there. In fact, I just did it today as I was recording another video. I totally forgot to do something, and rather than go back, I just scrapped it and started again. So that being said, I'm going to start by showing you these things in red, and these things in red are user-facing things. So the user sees a login screen. If something goes wrong, then they get a message that it's wrong. If something goes right, then something happens. In other words, we're launching an action, if a then portion of an if statement, which is going to open the main menu. And then the program is going to set a temp variable for the user for later use, so that while the person is in the database, it always knows who's logged in, and you can use that information somewhere else. Okay? So let's create the parts of this right now. So I'm going to flip over to the database, and I'll wait for you to get the database open if you don't have it open. And what we'll be doing is creating the bones of this. And what that means is we're going to need 2 things at least in the table area, and that is a table called current user, and then another table called TBL user. And the table for users is an actual part of the database that you could probably connect to a table, whereas current user isn't. Current user is for the sake of storing whoever is currently logged into the database. So let's create those 2 tables real quick here. I'm going to go to create. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to table design. This is current user. Okay. Data type should be short text, and we want that to be 10 characters. Or 15, it just depends. We're just going to go with short usernames here. Okay. And that's it. We want to save it. And we're going to call it current underscore user. And of course, my field name is missing, so we'll still do that. There we go. And no primary key. You can set a primary key in this table, and that would save you from having someone logged in twice. In fact, let's do that. And I'm going to close it. Okay. Next table is going to be the TBL user table. And it's going to have several fields. So let's go ahead and do this. Username, short text, and 10 characters because we want it to match. Password, let's stick with an 8-character password for now. And then we want privilege level. And I'm going to keep that at 20. And then something we'll talk about later, or that I might set you free to do on your own, is allow a reset. So a user could, while they're logged in, come in and reset their password. However, because some people just stay logged in all the time, someone could come in and evilly change their password for them and they would never know. And they'd never be able to get into the database again. So we're going to put an extra check in here and leave it the longest length for text. And this is going to be their secret question and answer that's going to prove that it's actually the person who is asking. All right, username should be the primary key. And I'm going to save it, and this is going to be TBL user. Now, one of the main things that we looked at back here in this document that I showed you is that we have a login screen. The login screen is going to be launched by AutoExec. Okay, so the very first thing they get is a nice message box, and then they have to log in. We need a form to do that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use that table that we just created, current user, and create a form out of it. All right. So I'm just going to go quickly over here and run the form wizard really quickly. I've already selected table current user, or sorry, current user. I'm going to add this to the selected fields. It's the only one we have. And then everything stays the same, and then we can finish it. I'm going to go immediately to design view, and I'm going to get rid of all the extra stuff. And I'm going to do a few jobs here that we're going to need to do in order to create this login. Right now we have current user, and instead of just saying current user here, I'm going to say please enter your username. Sorry. Move this over just a little bit. Okay. And then we need a place to put the password. So we're going to add a brand new text box here, and this text box is right there, and I'm going to put please enter your password. Okay, so there's your login screen. Now, how are we going to deal with this? Well, remember that even though I name things over here and put words in over here, this is going to show up in some details. So, for example, I've got this current user, and I'm just going to call this txt current user so that I can remember it. And then I'm going to go over here to the unbound one where it says text3, and I'm going to call it txt password. We're going to need to use these objects. We're going to need to let the database program know what's in there. So we need to find them. You'll remember that we used a similar thing when we did queries. We used this as criteria for a query. So this is going to serve as a container for the password. So if we go back to our program flow, you can kind of see what's going to happen here. User password, we check these two objects, whether they're null or not. And if they are not, then we will continue with the macro. So how does that happen? Well, like I said, we launched this login through AutoExec. And then we punch a button right here, which we'll put on later, that runs our login macro. And then the login macro, while this form is open, will check for this stuff. So now we've got that piece in place. So I am going to close this and save changes, but I'm going to go over here and rename it. If I can find it again. Sorry about that extra one on this video screen, but I had a couple of false starts on this video. So I'm going to rename it Login. Okay. Now, we need to start doing that macro that's going to check and make everything beautiful for us. So let's go ahead and go to Create, Macro. And of course, the very first step that we're going to take is to comment it. And this macro will check the username and password and the privilege level. Okay, so basically this is our login. It should be named MCR login and created on 2/11. Okay. That's what you should be doing with all of your comments and such. You should make sure that they're pretty explicit and you tell who did what. All right. So remember I said that this is going to be launched from the screen that you just saw. So on the login screen, while that form is still open, this macro will run. And the reason that's important is because some of these actions you won't know, it won't know what to do if the form is not open. So this macro can't actually be tested until we finish it and make sure that the login form is open. That's something to keep in mind if you run into trouble with your testing. Okay. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to start with a big ol' if statement. Okay. So there's my if. Notice how it runs in Access. We've got our if, and then we've got our then. And down here we have two handy little buttons over on the right called Add Else and Add Else If. So if you want to do some crazy things with nesting, you can do that there. We're going to do a nest, but in a slightly different way. Notice what happens too is you get an end if right there. Okay. Keep note of that because that's true in Visual Basic and it's something that you should remember to do. This does it automatically in Access, but when you're writing code from scratch, if you type in your if, then go ahead and make sure the end if shows up as well, and that way you'll never forget to add it to your code. It needs to be there. So let's go ahead and check to see if those controls are null. And there it is. I can hit Tab, and I want to check, what did I call that? TXT current user equals false and is null. TXT password equals false. This is a Boolean function, and so it's going to return true or false. So I'm just checking to see if it's null.